All right, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. Our first guest today is David Swanson. His books include War is a Lie and Daybreak. He blogs at davidswanson.org and warisacrime.org. That used to be after Downing Street. Remember when the Downing Street memos came out, and it was the head of British intelligence, the head of MI6, from his Smithers' notes on their meeting with Bush and Blair, that we have decided we're going to make up whatever lies we need to make it seem true that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction so we can justify invading the country we want to invade anyway. Yeah, and it was right there in their thing. So yeah, Downing Street. After Downing Street, we were supposed to impeach and remove the president, but that never happened. But anyway, so now it's warisacrime.org. And he's, as I said, the author of War is a Lie, and he hosts Talk Nation Radio. I didn't know that. This article is Veterans for Peace supports UN committee in questioning U.S. recruitment, killing of children at dissidentvoice.org. Whoa. Welcome back to the show, David. How are you doing?
I'm great. Good to be here. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's been way too long since we've spoken. And what an occasion to do so. I'll tell you, I don't like the UN, and I don't like them poking around in my country's business, but then again, I recognize that the U.S. government is the most corrupt and murderous on the face of the planet, so I'm open to hearing their criticisms anyway. Go ahead. What the hell is this about recruitment and killing children?
Well, the United States, as you may know, is one of 3 countries that has not ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The other 2, in whose stellar company we are Somalia and South Sudan. And yet, the United States has ratified and is a party to an optional protocol to that treaty, which addresses the rights of children in armed conflict and puts in place strict protections on recruitment of anyone under 18 into the military, which must be strictly voluntary and with consent of parents and so forth. And the members of this protocol must send periodic reports into, yes, an evil international body, but one that got Iraq right and Afghanistan right, as opposed to how the United States has gotten these wars. And so this committee on the protection of children in armed conflict has sent a report back to the United States just last week, and the U.S. has till November to reply, raising a big series of concerns. Now, this is not strictly up to the standards of how, for example, African war criminals are treated. We just saw one convicted within the past day of taking children into war. But the concerns include how the United States recruits, the fact that it has these junior ROTC programs, that it has these tests, these standardized tests, the ASVAB, American Services Vocational Aptitude Battery tests that are given to hundreds of thousands of kids in our schools, and they aren't told it's for the military, but the results are funneled to the recruiters, giving them all kinds of ammunition, for lack of a better word, for recruiting kids. And it raises concerns about all these areas of recruitment, and also about how many children have been killed in Afghanistan and in Iraq by our wars, and has it been justifiable and proportional and so forth, and concerns about how many children are imprisoned by the United States under President Obama in recent years in Afghanistan, and children who have been or are unlawfully detained and abused in Guantanamo, as well as the United States arming foreign nations that are well known to employ child soldiers and so forth. I mean, it's a long list of concerns at the very same time that the United States is talking up the possibility of yet more wars in the name of human rights. It's quite a contrast.
Yeah. It's what a legacy, huh? Yeah, this one just happens to bother me is I like watching the skateboarding on the TV since I don't get out too much myself anymore these days. But there's a Navy or a Marine Corps commercial at every single break. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know. Skater kids, they're my kin, that's my tribe, is the skater kids of the world. And the military's picking on them and lying to them and trying to make this seem all very normal, And it's not. It's wrong. It's stupid. It's crazy. And especially skater kids, at least when I was a kid, we were the outcasts. We were in trouble. That's why we were skaters or whatever. And so to think that any skater kids would grow up to join the military at all, to me, is just crazy. But especially you watch the X Games on TV, believe me, the right end of that bell curve on the age list there. Most people watching that are probably 12 years old with their mouth hanging open and their eyes wide, getting brainwashed.
Indeed. The military goes to great lengths in this country to indoctrinate children, and it doesn't care which children or what type of children, as long as they might go into the military. So, of course, there's more emphasis in poor areas of the country and poor rural and urban neighborhoods. But you have events happening around the country that we saw these on Flag Day and on July 4th with new recruits and soldiers and ROTC and JROTC and Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts, and you have giant inflatable soldiers bouncing around and toys for the children along with weapons for the soldiers. We have uniformed generals going into kindergartens. We have the military investing in video game development and production and Hollywood movies. You have a budget of billions of dollars a year for advertising. We're just today, as we speak, at rootsaction.org, launching a campaign to try to take out the funding, the $80 million a year that the military puts into sponsoring NASCAR racers and sporting events sponsorships of that sort, the biggest being the National Guard and NASCAR, overwhelmingly. And this is something that the Democrats, combined with the more libertarian Republicans going against their own chairman, have passed through the House Armed Services Committee that, there is going to be some little bit of something cut out of the military, while the law put in place last year, the Budget Control Act, requires minimal cuts to the military beyond this, and yet you have Congressman McKeon, Republican from the Drone Caucus, pushing for a vote on the floor this month to get that funding back in there for buying NASCAR racers, and it seems tiny, $80 million, when you're talking about $1 trillion budget for the war machine in this country, but the Army claims to get a third of its recruits from motorsports events and recruitment stations at racetracks. So it is a step toward a saner, less militarized society. And the Army, not the National Guard, which is the big one, but the Army has already just today announced that they won't be funding NASCAR next year. Still, we need Congress to put that ban on the books for all branches of the military.
That's funny. It's like this is Sparta or something, the normalcy of it all when there are no real enemies in the world. You would think that they had found some new continents with some new major powers on them or something that we had to face down for all of this.
They're looking.
But anyway, I'm sorry. Hold it right there. Everybody, it's David Swanson. His new piece at Dissident Voice is about the UN calling the U.S. out for recruiting and killing and imprisoning children, our government. We'll be right back after this. DissidentVoice.org. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. I'm talking with David Swanson. He's got a new piece at DissidentVoice.org. Veterans for Peace supports UN committee in questioning U.S. recruitment, killing of children. And so, now, here's the thing. I got my problems with the ASVAB thing. In fact, I think it's probably the only news story I ever did, actually, was about some kids at a junior high school thwarting the military recruiters' attempt to get the student population to take the thing. And they kind of exposed what it was and all that. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, that's a big deal. And I don't like the brainwashing on TV all the time, and I don't like the ROTC and all the schools and all of these things. I'm not sure it's the UN's business. I'm not sure it really even counts as recruiting of children. It's just, I mean, it's really, if anything, it's a reflection of our society and how much people love that kind of thing. You know what I mean? After all, jet fighters and tanks and stuff are really cool, and so that's how people are. I'm not really sure if that part is the UN's business. Then you talk about buying children from Pakistani headhunters and imprisoning them at Guantanamo Bay. And now, I'm not sure if that's the UN's business or whatever. That's certainly an outrageous crime that is certainly worth focusing on, I think. Can you tell us more? How many kids are focused there? We're talking Omar Khadr and things like this?
Well, I think it's absolutely everybody's business that the United States is violating legal and moral norms and exposing children to war propaganda, war recruitment, and lawless imprisonment and abuse in war, not to mention the bombs falling on children's houses in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, and so forth. I think it's, you know, I have endless complaints with the United Nations. It is not democratic. It is not international. It is not consistently applying the law to all. It's largely under the thumb of 5 major nations and one in particular. But, you know, occasionally it does things right. You know, rare, even extremely occasionally, our own government does things right. And when it does, and when it serves as a microphone for us in this country and around the world who are opposed to these kind of actions to join together and say, wait a minute, you are legally obliged to explain what in the world you're doing and how it could possibly be legal. I think that's very helpful. And we don't know. And here's a committee asking how many children the United States has locked up since President Obama came into the White House in Afghanistan. And the children that are known to have been held and then released without any explanation or restitution or compensation from Guantanamo, and who are still there, who were locked up when they were children. How have they been treated? How will they be compensated for the wrongs? And so forth. I think anyone who can compel the U.S. government even to offer, a twisted explanation for how it can possibly dare such things, is to be encouraged.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I just, I want to see all these solutions solved from the bottom up, well, like what you do. Try to get it to where maybe our society isn't so militarized, and maybe, we will be the ones who make the difference, here, instead
right.
of having to be told by the Europeans or anybody else. You know what I mean?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've only encouraged Spain to put George W. Bush in prison because the United States refused to. I mean, I would much rather have our own country handle our own screw-ups. But it's not your average American who is flying jets over the Super Bowl and sponsoring Dale Earnhardt's race car and creating multi-million-dollar Hollywood blockbusters that make killing look like the coolest sport there is. I mean, people just don't have the resources to do that. It's not your average private initiative, entrepreneurial venture that's, setting up recruiting stations at the Daytona 500. I mean, this is something that tax dollars are being wasted on to the tune of billions of dollars a year. And it militarizes our culture beyond whatever low point it's at currently. It pushes it further for that kind of money to be dumped into a professional campaign to make killing look like a sport. I mean, no society could be subjected to that level of propaganda and not become more militarized in its culture.
Yeah. Well, you know, I guess we saw especially the best example to me anyway was that show 24. And there's an article by Jane Mayer in the New Yorker where she went and really investigated the guy that put it all together and his avowed mission to normalize torture in American society and to use his TV show to get people to understand that sometimes you got to torture somebody, otherwise everybody will die. And they weren't even, it's like it wasn't a secret. That was openly, this is the pro-torture show, and you know, I guess you're just a wuss if you're not for torture. You must be worse than a Democrat.
Well, that's the thinking, twisted and misguided and factually unsupported as it is that the greater good is accomplished by gritting your teeth and doing the necessary, difficult things that must be done. And if you're afraid to torture one person to save 10,000 people, well, then step aside. We need strong men to handle this for you. And the facts don't support it in the least. It's never been a technique that's done good. It's always made things worse. It doesn't pull useful, accurate, trustworthy information out of anyone. It brutalizes them and the people who do it to them. But that's the way these people think, and they are very, very successful. I went to a conference in Washington, D.C. some months back with people from all over the world who work with torture victims, who work to get them asylum, who work to get them legal compensation, who work to counsel them and cure their injuries. And universally, they told me, acceptance of torture is up around the world. I mean, it's hard to say whether torture itself is up because monitoring and recording of it is up, but acceptance of it is up dramatically, and universally they told me the number one factor is Hollywood, and many of them mentioned 24.
That's just sick. It really is. And what's funny is, you know, I'm the furthest thing from some utopian, but it's just so obvious that it does not have to be this way at all. I mean, it's like a deliberate suicide here of our culture, of our society, you know? It's crazy.
Well, we need a movement at this point, not just to end wars or to end a particular war, but to survive as a species. We need a human survival movement, and that includes altering our destruction of the natural environment, and it includes demilitarizing and shifting. And these are two interlocking campaigns, of course, as the wars are fought for the oil and use a huge chunk of the oil for which they fight the wars. But we at this point have to act for survival of the environment, of a decent form of government, of our civil liberties in the face of patriotized militarism, or we're not going to survive as a species.
Yeah, well, and, you know, speaking of which, and I think you and I may have discussed this before, you think about the importance of what really still exists as the nuclear arms race between the United States and Russia, who still have thousands of nuclear missiles pointed at each other. Thousands. And nobody even cares at all. This is like the 175th most important issue to the average person, at least in America. I don't know about everywhere else in the world, but isn't this the most important thing of all, that we get rid of all these thermal nukes before we all die?
I think between the climate being destroyed, our atmosphere being destroyed, and the proliferation of and the threat of nuclear war, I mean, these are the top two most likely things to destroy everything. And the threat hasn't gone away just because the Cold War went away. In fact, the Cold War is coming back, and the United States is pressuring Russia and China quite hard.
All right, I'm sorry, we got to leave it there. David Swanson, everybody, dissonantvoice.org, warisalie.com. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Scott.